Welcome to this special bonus episode of Talk Commerce. On April 8th, 2022, Magento organized and hosted an unconference in Orlando, Florida. I had the pleasure of interviewing each of the sponsors at the event. I would encourage you to visit and learn more about what each does. I'm also happy to announce the Talk Commerce newsletter called Platforms. I'll be covering news from the major commerce platforms as well as technologies that are related to e-commerce. I will also have an Entrepreneur's Corner to share some experiences that other entrepreneurs are going through. I would encourage you to sign up today at talkcommerce.com. The first issue comes out on June 1st. Over the next 9 weeks, you'll enjoy interviews from SwiftOtter, SalesLater, Image Engine, Clayvu, WebScale, Nexus, Adobe, JetRails, and Celigo. Each of these sponsors showed up to the event and participated in the unconference. And now, Talk Commerce, live from Unconference, Florida. All right, today I have Robert Rand from JetRails at Unconference, Florida on Talk Commerce. I almost said Shop Talk. I've said Shop Talk a couple times. We are at Talk Commerce at the Unconference in Florida, and it's been a long day. So Robert, great to have you here. Tell us about what you're doing day to day, and tell us about JetRails.
Thanks, Brent. Great to be here. So day to day, I oversee partnerships and alliances at JetRails. We're a mission-critical web hosting provider. So we work with platforms like Magento and Shopware, and I manage our relationships with all the outside organizations, from the agencies that are building the sites to the tech providers and integrations and platforms themselves. So companies like Shopware, AWS, Cloudflare, et cetera. And so really help to keep that ecosystem all, really working closely together and supporting each other, making sure that merchants are getting what they need.
Yeah, so we've had quite a few talks here today that involve how hosting partners and how agencies and how merchants interact. What do you think is the most important thing now if a merchant is getting an on-prem, but we've also heard a lot about hosted applications. Tell us where you think it's going and what should a merchant be looking for?
Big question, but at the heart of it, I think, number one, any time that you're bringing in vendors, looking for people that you're going to partner with long-term. I try not to overuse that word in too many ways, that you're going to rely on. Communication becomes key. So there are a lot of times that you can save a nickel here and there and then deal with issues where your vendors aren't working well together. So your devs and your web host and your internal team aren't in direct communication. They don't have good action plans for rolling out updates and deploying things and maintaining things, and things get real messy real fast. And so we find that's the gold standard, is making sure that everyone has those open lines of communication, that they're all in touch, that they all have shared expectations when it comes to the processes in play and best practices and how everything's going to run smoothly, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure there. In terms of SaaS and PaaS, platform as a service, and microservices and all these things that we've been talking about as a group today, I think that it's really interesting to look at some of the history, because it's not, as we heard today, it's not all terribly new. We've seen things like headless going around for ages. It's become a lot bigger of a focal point in the last few years, and the buzzwords have really flown around, and there have been a lot of advancements. When it comes to how we handle this, we've seen companies like Clayvu and SearchSpring and Algolia and so on and so forth working with search for years and years, so seeing things like Adobe's live search coming into Adobe Commerce and different things. It's not terribly surprising, the same way of seeing things like payments, where there's always a third party involved. And now we see more hosted checkouts like Bolt that come in and play a deeper role and have some really strong value propositions. And so none of that really surprises me. We continue to see a lot of demand for having control of the core, for being able to really have some manifest destiny there. And I don't personally think that for the companies that are more technologically forward or do need that kind of flexibility and customization, or there are all these different categories that we see for whether it's B2B or whether it's brands and categories that really don't want to be boxed in by the terms of service of a particular platform or the limitations of it, that there continues to be this need and this want for, whether or not it's exactly a monolith, in many cases it is, just having that open source option. And we see communities all over the world still really committed to that and see that as important, because when you start to lose that direction, you start to see limitation come in quickly, and you start to see that things stagnate around one company owning the stack or doing something unique. So I'm hopeful based on what I've heard today that there seems to be a lot of understanding that there needs to be focus on making things maintainable, slimming things down to a point that the merchant can get what they need without a bunch of things that they don't, or there's so many facets to this, but that doesn't really take away from the demand for something that the merchant can really own and control.
Yeah, and I think one thing that merchants should always be looking at, no matter if you're going with Magento or BigCommerce or Shopify or Shopware, you have pieces of code that need to be hosted somewhere. And especially the merchants that want to do something that is not the typical out-of-the-box stuff, which are a lot of them. There's a reason why they choose Shopware or Magento, is because they can't get it out of the box. But some of them choose something like BigCommerce. So the first thing is that if you're doing something in the PWA range, you have to host it somewhere, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. And if you have a customization that you want to do on Shopify, let's say, you have to host that customization somewhere. It's not just a magic box that works for whatever you want. It only works for what they deliver.
Absolutely, and in most cases, those things also become mission critical because, if they're not operating, something, whether it's on the front end or back end processes, something isn't functioning in the business, and whether that's customer facing or back of the house, it's critical. So we find that one of the reasons that we partnered with BigCommerce, and we're the only web host you'll find in the BigCommerce App Store, is because we knew that users run into these needs, whether it's for various headless hosting or whether it's for custom apps and things that they write side by side, and we have users on Shopify and other platforms that come to us for those needs. But by and large, we're best known for what we do with Magento. We're seeing very interesting growth around Shopware now that I would attribute it overall to the fact that users that go with a SaaS solution like a Shopify, they, by and large, they go there for the simplicity. They go there so that they don't have as much maintenance, they won't have to do as much of that. It's almost paradoxical or a bit of an oxymoron to go to a SaaS platform and then go headless and take on all the React development and having to expose all the apps and things on the front end and need a developer to be able to make any changes or do things, again, depending on which front end you're using. So I'm not sure exactly what the pickup will be. I feel strongly that PWAs will continue to grow in both ease and in their use in the market. But by and large, even in open source ecosystems like Magento and Adobe Commerce, where we see companies that have lots of dev resources already, we see a limited uptake of these headless applications and PWAs and things. So I think that it's been a big topic, but we see a lot more demand for things like in the Magento ecosystem for Hoova, for a front-end theme to replace the old Luma theme with Knockout.js, and launched in 2015, and it's not getting replaced. The PWA Studio is there, but we're not getting a traditional theme from Adobe to replace it. So the market spoke, and one of the things that I found to be interesting, like the Slack group for that theme is huge. I want to say well over 1,000 users in there, which is a lot more than you find in, let's say, the Magento Association's Slack group. By the way, anybody that's not a member there should be, and I hope that they do go and interact there. Great organization to be a part of. But the market really, which is a true open source way of looking at it, that the market saw a gap and it got answered, and we're seeing major uptake. And so where not everyone wants to to be responsible for a PWA. They do want a really fast front end that's easier to manage and debug, that's got better core web vitals scores, that really addresses their concerns more succinctly and without adding too much more technical debt or challenge down the road.
Yeah, that's great. Robert, we're out of time, but I thank you so much for being here.
Again, thanks for having me, and this was a lot of fun. I look forward to being at this event again, hopefully next year.
Yeah, next year a little earlier in January so we can get a little bit cooler weather. And so it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you again for listening. My name is Brent Peterson, and it has been a pleasure to be your host today. Please sign up for our newsletter platforms at talk-commerce.com. Rate and subscribe to Talk Commerce wherever you download your podcasts. New shows out every week.